Free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
1948, before the Nakba, during the Nakba, and after the Nakba, and different Nakbas happened in my life, And the Nakba goes on now with my family, friends, and my people. Could you, I call this Palestine. This is a picture of Palestine by an Orientalist. I was visiting the Arab world, visiting Palestine, and it's famous. And it shows them, and it shows the profile of Jaffa. Can you go on to the next slide, please? For those of you who hear the message, there was nothing like Palestine. Here is a postage stamp of Palestine with what age? What date? 1889. And this is a picture of Palestine. That's better, thank you. Of Jerusalem in 1948. Can you go on? Here we are, Jerusalem, Palestine, 1980, 1920, the American consulate in Jerusalem. So those people who keep telling us there was no Palestine ever, there's been a Palestine at least known on geography for 4,500 years. And the sum total of those 4,500 years, when there was a Jewish kingdom, whether it was David or Saul, add up to only a total of 386 years. That's all in the history of Palestine. The rest of the time, Palestine has been living as Palestine. Can you go on, please? This is my father, Hasan Hammami. He died alone in Baghdad in 1962. He died alone when he was trying to start up a business after emigration, after our exile from Palestine. And he was, in his life, he was a Renaissance man. He was youngest among 3 brothers and 2 sisters. And he actually, right after World War II, he had installed in our house a telephone exchange, and the telephone number was 1109, with branches to my 2 uncles who live near us, and to his office business in the city. Go on, please. This is my mother, Nafisa Shatila. Nafisa Shatila is a 3rd generation Yafawiye from the family of Shatila who come from Beirut, whose name has become infamous after 1982. It should be wholly in our history, because what happened in Shatila refugee camp in 1982, there was a massacre of all of the refugees in 1982. She came from the family after whom that district of Beirut is called Shatila. Can you go on? My father and my uncle were in the citrus growing and export business. And this is one of the newspaper ads that was in Ad-Difa and the Palestine newspapers in Jaffa. Go on, please. This is my grandfather, Hasan Hammami. Hasan Hammami lived a long, long life. His grave is still where he was buried in the cemetery, in the Jabaliya cemetery in Jaffa. Every time I go to Jaffa and visit Jaffa and occupied Palestine, Israel, I go and visit his grave. This is a picture of the family with me arriving. In the middle, my father, and I'm sitting on his lap, the first boy after 3 girls. You know what that means in our society. First boy after 3 girls. I was raised as a prince. It wasn't my choice, but that was part of the culture. However, I want you to know, my father was extremely Renaissance person. He made sure we all had a good education. We all went to university. We all learned the whole business of personal development and personal growth and understanding what it is, where it is we come from, what our roots are. Now, this is a school in Jaffa where I went to school, Madrasat al-Frere. It's called Collège des Frères des Écoles Chrétiennes. It's a Christian Brothers school that was built in Jaffa in 1980. That's how many years before Israel was existed, started? 20 and 48, 68 years before Israel was established, created. Here are some pictures of my family and myself. On the left-hand side, my three elder sisters. One of them has passed away. That's Nahida, who is the one on the right. She died last year at age 96. We had good genes. God gave us good genes, but it's not only good genes that you need. You also need to treat your body and your mind and your spirit in a good way. On the right-hand side is a picture of me about 10 years old. It was a studio picture, a studio called Ganzu in Jaffa. Okay, next one. Now here's a picture of the three, of myself, my sister Fatima, and my brother Hussein. So which one should I? Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Good, thank you. So my brother Hussein is on the left. He died last year. He grew up in the business of diplomacy. When he finished college at the American University of Cairo, he chose to go into diplomacy, and he ended up getting firstly a master's degree from Columbia University. You know about Columbia University, right? It has a great history of free speech and also of questioning education. When you learn education, you have to understand and not just memorize and get what you take. You have to understand what is the cause of this particular issue. Why did it happen? What are the ways to get out? Okay. Now, in Jaffa, once a year in the spring, there was a mausim. It's like a season where nearly 30,000 people from Jaffa, Alid, Ramle, and all other areas nearby had a picnic for 2 weeks. And in fact, it was fabulous. And in that picnic, it was an outdoor picnic, they moved and pitched tents, and they lived in tents. This was an area around the Rubin River and around a very small special building that was after a good person in history whose name was Rubin. And next one. This is the whole family. So when you're in this picnic, you wear picnic clothes or pajamas or something. The next one. Now this is the first sister that I had who got married. Faizi got married 3 months before the Nakba in 1948, and this is her husband, Mamdouh. Mamdouh saw her coming out of school. She had finished secondary school, and she was going to finishing school, and he wanted to know who she was. He couldn't obviously go meet her, but he inquired and found out her name was Hasan Hammami, as his father and mother, and they knew, his father knew my father, and they approached and they got married just a few months before the Nakba. Next one. Now this is a picture of the City Council of Jaffa. You can read what it says, who are the members. The head of the City Council was Omar al-Bitar, the Bitar family, with the City Council members from left to right, Hassan Arafi, Manir Mislak, who was a Jewish Arab, an Arab Jew, was a member of the City Council of Jaffa, Al-Ma'ali al-Mustaqim, Mas'ud Dirhali, and Juhdi Abu Jubain. Mas'ud Dirhali was the father of a fellow student of mine at school who was in my class and whose name was Zuhdi Dirhali. He was Palestinian, he was Muslim. In our school, by the way, which was a Catholic school, there were Palestinian Muslim boys, Palestinian Christian boys, and Palestinian Jewish boys. Get that in your head. There were Palestinian Jewish people for years. They're not the ones who came from Eastern Europe. The ones who came from Eastern Europe are not really Semitic, they are Ashkenazi. They came from a tribe that is Turkic, that is from southern Eastern Europe, what is now, what used to be the south of the Soviet Union. And so we were an integrated city for many years. Can you go on, please? Now, in the school, a few months before the Nakba, we had a school play, and the school play was called Al-Baramika. It was in Jaffa. It was important to know that at that time, this was the first year after the end of World War II, when, Palestine was beautiful, had everything. Life was good for everyone, except for one thing. It was occupied by the British, and occupied by the British under military rule. And in 1938-39 was the largest Arab revolution against rebellion against the British Empire in Palestine. And at that time, Britain took all of the social and political leaders of society, and the highest of them, they sent them for exile. Guess where? To the Seychelles Islands. The Seychelles Islands are remote islands south of India. They were put in a military camp. The lower ones were put in a military camp in Cyprus, which was a British colony. And so at the end of World War II, when World War II ended, we were leaderless. Our society was leaderless, not by choice, but because our leaders had all been taken away from their cities, their camps, their communities, and exiled. Some of them escaped, and escaped to where? Escaped to the enemies of Britain, escaped to Germany. One of them was Sheikh Amin Husseini. Sheikh Amin Husseini was one from an old Husseini family in Jerusalem, who was essentially the Grand Mufti of Palestine. And Israelis and Israeli Hasbara, Israeli propaganda, it keeps going about him as being a Nazi. He was not a Nazi. He was a Palestinian freedom leader, a freedom leader who escaped from Britain by going to Iraq and then escaping to Germany. Go on. Now, this is an interesting picture I want you to see well clearly. It's made up of two parts. The part on the left is the city center of Jaffa, historic, and it's got the clock tower. It's famous for, it's called the Clock Tower Square. On the left-hand side, that tall building was the Sarai. Sarai is a Sarai, bil-Arabi, Saraya. That means it was the location of the Ottoman governor. Okay, I want you to see that picture and see that in the bottom of that picture, I want you to at some point remember the picture because I'm going to come back to it. On the right-hand side of the picture was a French hospital. It was a hospital that was built by a French non-governmental organization which was charitable. Why did they do it in Palestine? Many of Europeans believed Palestine was the Holy Land, and that's where they went to go to do their pilgrimage. And most of the ones who went for their pilgrimage came to where? Came through the port of Jaffa, the port of my city. And this hospital was built by France. It was called the French Hospital. Most of the nurses were Palestinian. Two of the doctors were Palestinian, and a few others were French. Go on to the next. Now, I want you to take a picture in your mind and keep in mind. This is a part of Jaffa, which is the northern part of Jaffa. It's called Manshiyeh, Al-Manshiyeh. Northern part of Jaffa. In 1948, it had about 30,000 people. until the end of 1947. Part of it was mixed with Arab Jews living in it and Arab Christians and Muslims as well. But after November 1947, when the United Nations made a decision which was horrible for us, a decision which was driven by the colonial countries, Britain and France and America, even Russia, the Soviet Union at that time, to actually divide Palestine into two parts. Make one part a national home for the Jews. That gave them 54% of the land, and the other part, 46% of the land, was meant to be the Arab country.